Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. It is my privilege to be able to do this show for you guys as we start to dive into the right now currently potential matchup of the World Series. Currently, we do not know the matchup that the Los Angeles Dodgers are going to have in the World Series. The Dodgers made it back to the World Series in the year 2025, the year we are at right now, and now it is up to us to try to distinguish and evaluate one of the teams that the Dodgers could potentially be facing. Tonight is currently October 20th. Tonight is going to be Game 7 of the American League Championship Series that will determine who the Dodgers face in the World Series. So it becomes a question to us as far as who should the Dodgers want to face in this series. This is a question that comes up quite a bit when we're waiting to see what happens in this series. Now, for this specific question, I'm going to do my best with whatever capacity that I have. Not necessarily to give a definitive answer to that question, because I think there can be differences of opinion either way depending on how you look at this matchup, but to present a statistical point of view and evaluation of both the Seattle Mariners and the Toronto Blue Jays so that you understand the makeup of each of these teams and how they directly compare to the Los Angeles Dodgers. I believe that that is going to be how I can best contribute to this is to take a deep dive. Who are the Mariners? Who are the Toronto Blue Jays? How do they actually compare to the Los Angeles Dodgers? And what have we been seeing from each of these teams during the postseason? Now, I had the privilege to be able to do a show on Friday after the Dodgers clinched the pennant, won the pennant, and advanced to the World Series. And I did a little bit of a deep dive into this on Friday, but I'm going to do it a little bit better and a little bit more in-depth of a deep dive into both of these teams. We'll be going into different players, different matchups, how each of these players have been performing in the postseason, and where some of the strengths of each of these teams are at this point. So I want to know for you guys, what is the preferred matchup for you guys? Do you want to see the Dodgers go up against the Seattle Mariners, or do you want to see them go up against the Toronto Blue Jays? Who are you rooting for in the game tonight? Does it not matter either way? So you might be rooting for, I mean, both of the teams have not ever been to the World Series or not been to the World Series since '93. So there is going to be a city that has a lot of fans that have not seen what is going to take place tonight, and that is either Seattle or Toronto advancing to the World Series. We'll be diving into that. We'll be taking a lot of your guys' questions about the state of where the Dodgers are at, perhaps diving into, are there any specific changes that the Dodgers need to make as a team going into the World Series to be able to be the best team possible? Or what are some of your biggest concerns about the Dodgers team and going into the series? Let's actually go ahead and start it with that. And we'll go ahead and get into a little bit of history as far as my biggest concern with the Dodgers. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the Dodgers team in specific, but rather the history behind it. So just an overall evaluation of where I am at personally with my comfort of the Dodgers going into this. I'm really confident with where the Dodgers are at as far as their ability to go out there and be able to produce and succeed at a really high level. Their starting pitching is amazing. And they have been able to produce enough offense during the course of each one of the rounds to where they seem like an unstoppable force, especially if you don't have to turn over to the bullpen. The starting pitching seems to be doing incredibly well. And even during long stretches of layoff, man, the number of days that it took in between Shohei Ohtani starts, and he still went out there and threw 6 scoreless innings, was really encouraging to me. I think the biggest thing that I have perhaps concerned, and I wouldn't necessarily say concerned, because I think this is just a historic note of caution. Now, there's a lot of people who aren't concerned because of how they were able to respond as a team last year, as particularly their offense. After the long layoff from when the season ended to when the postseason started. But what I wanted to take a look at, and you can take this for whatever grain of salt it is. I just wanted to look at historic trends for teams that swept during the league championship series, either the American League Championship Series or the National League Championship Series. And I just wanted to look to see what those teams are doing. You can say the Dodgers are not going to fall under the same fate as each one of these teams, but I just want to proceed with historic caution for each one of these series. So these are, as far as my best knowledge, the league championship series that ended with a sweep of at least 4 game wins. So this dates back to 1985, after they changed the league championship series from going to a best of 5 to a best of 7. In a best of 7 situation, there have been 10 such series in which the pennant winning team swept the series and went on to the World Series. It happened in 1988 with Oakland, 1990 with Oakland, 95 with Atlanta, 06 with Detroit, 07 with Colorado, 12 with Detroit, 14 with KC, 15 with the Mets, 19 with Washington, and 22 with Houston. And all I want to do with this, and I think the only major takeaway, because the Dodgers are a very different team, they're much more experienced than many of these teams. The main things that I want to point out, though, is with the days of rest that each one of these teams have, we're talking about during the World Series, each one of these teams scoring about 1.5 runs less than what they average during the course of the regular season with an extended time period. Now, that you can attribute that to greater pitching during the course of the postseason, and you can look at the past 4 instances where this has happened, and there's less of a gap than in previous years. But each and every single time, there seems to be a decrease from the run production standpoint of what they had during the regular season and what they had during the postseason. And the record of each one of these teams that swept in the league championship series, went on to the World Series since 1985, is 3-10. Now, I use that as my only main source of caution for optimism, because I know optimism is really high for Dodgers fans, and why wouldn't it be with the way that this team is playing, with the way that this team is rolling, and with the fact that even last year they had a break and they were able to find a way to be able to get things going. All I'm saying with this is, historically, there seems to be some sort of negative effect on offenses that teams that advance from the championship series to the World Series has. Again, about 1.5 less per game on average for each one of these teams. I'm not anticipating that difference to be as drastic for the Dodgers, but with 6 days, in which case they are not playing playoff baseball, it is going to be at least a little bit of a challenge for the Dodgers, or a necessity for them to get things back rolling and to get rolling and to just go out there and produce offensively sound results. I think that's going to be a really important thing to be able to watch for this team, not because I don't believe in their ability, in this specific group's ability to do that, but because historically, you're talking about a lot of different teams that went on after sweeping the league championship series, going on to the World Series, and a lot of those teams struggled. I think the Dodgers are going to be a little bit different, and we're going to be breaking down why that is the case, because we will be talking Dodgers versus Mariners and Dodgers versus Toronto to be able to lead you guys up until Game 7 tonight, and then we will officially know whether Game 1 will be happening in LA, that is, if the Mariners win, or if Game 1 is going to be happening in Toronto, if Toronto is able to take it tonight. Could be more excited to be joining in with you guys. A lot of you guys tuning in. Bruce Davis, thank you very much for joining us. Chuck Huddleston as well. Daniel Barry Sports Highlights, thank you very much for joining us. Let's see. It says in 4 versus Toronto, hopefully. RACI Auto Parts. Hi, I think the Mariners would be better for the Dodgers because of much shorter travel and 4 home games if needed. Chuck Huddleston, I think Cal can be pitched to. I'm not sure about keeping Guerrero quiet for 7 games. So he prefers the Mariners. Johnny Owen is in the chat. I was at the Dodgers-Mariners series in Seattle. Cal Raleigh went 1 for 12 with 9 strikeouts and 12 runners in scoring position. I don't believe Seattle is it. We're going back-to-back. And then David Yu and Justin Lamas is in the chat as well. David Yu says the Seattle Mariners starting rotation overrated, not as dominant as I thought them to be. So let's actually get started with that, because again, it is a necessity on my part, as far as responsibility that I have to each one of you guys, to be able to present the best information and the best data possible to make sure that you guys are the most informed I can make you guys to be about everything to do with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and with with something as serious and as important as the World Series. It is essential that we know each one of these teams and where a lot of their strengths are. So what I have done for each one of you guys, and we'll be diving into some of these numbers, is I've actually given you guys resources available for each one of you guys, the exact same information and data that I'm using. Now, this is going to be some of the, as far as I'm aware, some of the most comprehensive data there is out there directly comparing each one of these teams, or at least I have not found something that is as comprehensive as this. It compares both the Dodgers and the Mariners, which is the team that we're going to look at first, directly next to each other to be able to look at the direct outputs. There's also a bunch of different tabs to be able to look at individual players to see where some of the strengths and weaknesses for each one of these teams are. So we're actually going to be doing that. And what we're going to do, we're going to spend a lot of time on the cam right now. Again, please follow along. Links are in the description of this video. Please utilize those to use your own evaluations and do your own scouting report, because you guys are incredibly thoughtful, mindful baseball fans as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to turn this over to here. This is something that I had helped create, and in order to properly interpret, properly analyze this data, what we have is we have a couple of different categories that we're going to be looking at, and we looked at some of these a little bit beforehand, and I'm just going to be kind of rolling through some of my observations that I had overall as far as the matchups between each of these teams. We're going to be looking at the full season stats. What did the course of the regular season show us for each one of these teams, as well as the projected World Series roster. And this is based on who is on the League Championship Series roster. If those rosters are on the team, what were their regular season stats? Because that is far more important than the full season roster stats. Because we don't need to look at the stats for players, for example, and I don't mean to pick on him, but like a Michael Conforto. If he's not going to be on the World Series roster, who cares what he hit during the course of the regular season? Because that bat does not impact the World Series as well. This is the columns for that. And then also looking at the postseason stats. How are these teams actually performing at these individual moments? And you can use each one of these to make your own evaluation as far as each one of these teams. I also have over here my, based on the numbers, evaluation of where each one of these teams are at. So looking at each one of these teams and overall, and what I'm going to be focusing on particularly is the World Series roster and the postseason stats. Again, World Series roster, looking at just individuals that are on the roster that are likely to be on the World Series roster if it is the Seattle Mariners. So this only includes stats for Randy Arozarena, for Cal Raleigh, for Julio Rodriguez, for all of the different guys that are currently on the roster for the Seattle Mariners in the League Championship Series, assuming that that is the roster they're going to roll out for the World Series. Could change a couple of these numbers, but that is going to be our best guess as far as what their roster is going to look like. And looking overall on the Seattle Mariners roster in the World Series, I don't think it is appreciated how well their offense has performed over the course of the regular season as far as the guys that are on the roster. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to switch tabs a little bit. We're going to look at the Seattle Mariners and their offense. And then we're going to look at these ones because these are the guys that are currently on the roster. And I want to make sure that you guys are understanding just how good the top of the lineup, really 1 through 7, has been for the Mariners throughout the course of the season. Obviously, Randy Arozarena, really solid for him on the season, 120 WRC+. You have Cal Raleigh, absolutely unbelievable season, 60 home runs, a 161 WRC+, hits for insane power, and does it both against righties and lefties. And this is what you're going to see is a lot of good for the Mariners against right-handed pitching, a little less against lefties, but even with that, they still have some players that do really well against left-handed pitching. Cal Raleigh's really good. Julio Rodriguez, obviously a superstar in the game, 126 WRC plus on the season for him. His expected numbers are really solid. Jorge Polanco, 132 WRC plus. I don't think people realize how good of a season Jorge Polanco has and just how much of a lefty killer Jorge Polanco is. A 150 WRC plus for him on the season. Josh Naylor, we'll get to his postseason stats. He's been unbelievable in the postseason. 128 WRC plus, came into the trade with Arizona. Same thing with Eugenio Suarez. These are his numbers for the total season, because it's not just the Mariners numbers that counts, it's the full season. Struggled a little bit more once he's gotten to Seattle, but still a 125 WRC plus, and perhaps one of the most underappreciated players. Yes, it was just 268 plate appearances. Dominic Canzone, 300 batting average, 358 on base percentage, a 141 WRC plus for him on the season with incredible expected statistics, and a hitter that can absolutely mash against right-handed pitching. You look at this lineup for splits against right-handed pitching, and you look at 1 through 7. If this is 1 through 7 for the Mariners, you're talking about all guys that have at least a 120 WRC plus or more against right-handed pitching. They also have Victor Robles, who's been injured for quite a bit this season. Not a huge force offensively. J.P. Crawford's been really solid for them throughout the course of the season as well. And then they've got some guys on the bench. You've seen a lot of Leo Rivas for the season, for the Mariners on the season. And so you're talking about an offense, when we look at the overall offensive stats in comparison for the World Series roster, what it actually broke down to, if you were to compare the Dodgers players that are on the postseason roster to the Mariners players, the Mariners as an offense were actually slightly better. And if we're talking about power component, which this really surprised me, the Mariners that are on the postseason roster hit 250 home runs versus the Dodgers at 213. Slightly higher ISO, which means that if the Mariners get hot, they can go on an absolute run. Now, I know Cal Raleigh struggled against the Dodgers during the most recent time that he had, and Randy Arozarena hasn't been the exact same player. We'll actually get to that talk in just a minute. But they hit for a lot of power. One thing that they do as an offense is there is more swing and miss in this bat, which is in this offense, which is why you've seen some of the struggles that the Mariners have had, as some of the inconsistencies, I should say. The Mariners can be an offense that can be very much boom or bust. They can be an offense that swings and misses quite a bit. They can also, just like that, change the game because of the power bats. When you're talking about Eugenio Suarez and Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh and Randy Arozarena and all these guys with incredibly powerful bats, they can turn the game just on a dime, just on an instance, and really good balance as an offense. Defensively, there is an advantage for the Dodgers. It's not a massive advantage, although Seattle is not a good defensive team, hasn't been a good defensive team this season. You can look at the overall season numbers. 67 defensive runs saved for the Dodgers versus just 9 for the Mariners. A lot of other defensive stats favor the Dodgers as well. Mariners are also a team that they're not just somebody who is going to hit some for offense. They're also going to take advantage on the base running too. 147 stolen bases for guys on the postseason roster versus 79 on the Dodgers. There is an advantage there. On the pitching side, Seattle has not been performing to what they are supposed to be as a pitching staff, particularly on the starting pitching staff in the League Championship Series round, but they are still a really solid unit, and one of the things that they don't do is they don't give up a whole lot of walks. Overall in the season, 7.4 walk percentage versus just 7 on this season versus 7 for the World Series roster for the Mariners, and that is very low total. That's one of the lowest totals in baseball. It was, I think, Chicago, the Cubs, Philadelphia, and then Seattle that was in that mix. They don't walk a whole lot, and yet they still are able to get a good amount of swing and miss. You look at their strikeout percentage It's 24.5 for the pitchers that are on the postseason roster right now. And they can do it against righties. They can do it against lefties. They have guys that can mix and match between the two. Let's actually break down some of the Seattle Mariners pitching staff to be able to look at where their pitchers are at. So these are going to be the pitchers that are going to be on the postseason roster or likely to be on the postseason roster for the Mariners. One thing that the Mariners do not have that a lot of other teams have, and really you can make this exact same thing with the Blue Jays once we get to them, there's not a whole lot of left-handed relief pitching. It's Caleb Ferguson and the guy that Shohei Ohtani would have to get used to, I think I said on the previous show, Gabe Speier. Both of those guys, especially Speier, really, really solid. I think he's going to be the matchup that is going to go against Ohtani basically every single game if it goes down to it. But he has been somebody that has been utilized quite a bit during the postseason. Other than that, a whole lot of right-handed pitching, which means there's going to be a whole lot of opportunities for some of the lefty bats like a Max Muncy would have to step up in a series against the Seattle Mariners because there's a good advantage platoon matchup for him because he's much better against right-handed pitching than he is lefties. Some of the starters, Logan Gilbert obviously has had a phenomenal season, insane amount of swing and miss for Logan Gilbert. Let's look at these. Look at some of these strikeout minus walk percentages for the Mariners starters. And when we're talking about the starters, it technically includes Bryce Miller, who's gotten some starts, but look at the other four guys that are starters. Brian Wu, been dealing with a little bit of injury, but coming back into form, hopefully, right now for the Mariners' sake, not for the Dodgers' sake. But looking at some of the strikeout minus walk percentages, which is some of the most predictive stats for telling you whether this pitcher is actually good. Logan Gilbert, 26.5% strikeout minus walk percentage. George Kirby, over 20%. Luis Castillo's 15.5%, still really solid. Brian Rue, 22.2%. They don't walk a whole lot of guys. Nobody is more than a 6.5% for walk percentage, and they get a decent amount of strikeouts as well. There's a lot of swing and miss in that part of the order. You also look at the bullpen. They have four different guys, 26% strikeout percentage or more, with Munoz, Brash, Bizzardo, and Speier. All of them really solid. All of them getting a whole lot of use over the course of what they're doing through the course of the postseason. You can look at some of their splits. They can get righties. Even though the Mariners have a lot of right-handed relievers, you look at some of these statistics against left-handed hitters. And what we're using for this, and I apologize, we're using a lot of numbers during the show today. In case you weren't aware, WOBA, weighted on base average, essentially uses different weights to give certain outcomes better measures and puts them on a scale of on-base percentage. Theory behind it is, in on-base percentage, a home run is seen as just as valuable as a single, when we know that a home run is much more valuable than a single. It provides different weights and allows power and different results to be put into more context. And if we're looking at each one of the main guys, or a lot of these different guys, Andres Munoz, slightly better against left-handed hitters. Matt Brash, slightly better against left-handed hitters. Edward Bizzardo, better against righties. Speier, better against lefties. Ferguson, better against lefties. They also have Carlos Vargas, who they've used in a little bit more low leverage, but he's, even though he's a righty, has been better against lefties throughout the course of this season. They have a lot of different guys that they can utilize as far as their staff. So how do the bullpens actually match up against the Dodgers, or the pitching staffs match up against the Dodgers? There's a slight advantage to the Dodgers as far as the overall pitching staff is concerned. If you look at the starters, it's a pretty strong advantage for where the Dodgers are at. We're looking at a 2.68 ERA for the postseason roster pitching staff versus 3.75. However, that does include the struggles that Bryce Miller has had throughout the course of the season. If you look at just the top four, that comparison gets a lot tighter, even though the Dodgers pitching I would say still is better than what the Mariners are at. When we're looking at the bullpen, there is an advantage that I would give the Mariners at this point, 3.32 versus 3.62 for the postseason roster. Overall in the season, 3.72 versus 4.27 Mariners comparing to the Dodgers respectively. So that leads me into how each one of these teams are playing during the postseason. And what we're actually going to do for this is we're actually going to look at the Mariners offense as a whole right now. So this is something new, something I did not show during the most recent appearance when we talked about each one of these rosters, because there's a very common narrative that's going on right now. The Blue Jays hit for power. Their offense is doing incredibly well. They're a great offense, which I'm not denying. They absolutely are hitting for power, and they're doing really well right now. The question is, what do we predict is going to happen in a World Series type environment? And this becomes a question for each one of you guys. Do you believe that the postseason stats are more representative for what they're going to do in the World Series, what they're going to do in a new 7-game series? Or is the full season stats better representative? Or perhaps how they did during the second half. With a postseason sample size, you're looking at about 10 or so games that you are evaluating each one of these players. Would you rather evaluate them on the 10 most recent games or the full season? Or perhaps the second half of the season? So what I did is I compared each one of these players by WRC+, comparing each one of these players to what they're doing in the postseason, second half, and full season. So you can see full season stats right here, they're WRC+. You can look at their second half WRC+, and you can look at their postseason WRC+. And what we're going to focus on is over here and look at each one of these comparisons. And what you're going to notice, there's a whole lot of blue for the Mariners. Now, if you are aware of Baseball Savant and what the red and blue signatures are, probably should have said this at the start, blue is not good. Red is good. In this case, we're seeing a whole lot of blue, which means that you're seeing a whole lot of players underperforming what they did during the course of the regular season. Let's start off with Randy Arozarena. In the postseason, currently has an 80 WRC plus entering into Game 7. That's down from a 120 WRC plus on the season, 97 WRC plus in the second half. So the question for you is, do you want to bet that Randy Arozarena is going to continue the struggles? Or is he due for a regression, a positive regression, meaning that he's underperforming right now, but I think he has a real opportunity to be able to bounce back? Cal Raleigh hitting somewhat a little bit better than what he did over the course of the regular season in the postseason. He's performing as expected. Julio Rodriguez, 103 WRC plus in the postseason. Jorge Polanco, 100 WRC plus during the postseason. Both of them dramatically underperforming what they did during the course of the regular season. If you were to bet during the course of a postseason, are you going to bet that these players are going to regress back to the mean? Or are you going to bet that they're going to continue with some of their struggles that they have, and with them being about league average? Josh Naylor, drastically overperforming. He's one of the players that is overperforming. Eugenio Suarez playing a little bit below what he did during the course of the regular season. Dominic Canzone, drastically struggling. I gave him a lot of praise for what he did during the regular season. Has not been able to hit during the postseason yet. J.P. Crawford also struggling quite a bit. So what you're noticing about the Mariners offense is they are very much underperforming what they did during the course of the regular season, which I think gives you one or two conclusions. Either that gives you encouragement because maybe they're not going to hit as well during the course of advanced postseason play. Maybe this is just how their offense has turned into. Maybe they're getting tired. Or this can give you a second, perhaps more concerning conclusion, is that there is a lot of talent that is part of this lineup that has not awoken yet. And perhaps the talent that has not awoken yet is going to rebound at some point, in which case there could be a really dangerous Mariners lineup that's in part of this. So the question is, do you think guys like Randy Arozarena, Julio Rodriguez, Jorge Polanco, I'll put in Eugenio Suarez, Dominic Canzone, and J.P. Crawford, do you believe that some of those guys are going to rebound to their season norms, or do you think they're going to continue to struggle? If they continue to struggle, the offense is going to have a lot of trouble scoring, in which case the Dodgers as a staff is going to have a really good time and the team's going to have a lot easier of a time. But there's a lot of room to grow with the Mariners team going into the postseason, which has me at least as a little bit of a concern. Looking at the Mariners pitching staff this postseason, again, similar comparison. We're looking at full season, second half ERA, and postseason ERA. This is just looking at ERA. Can be a little bit of a situation to where ERA, earned run average, especially with as limited of a sample size as you have one bad performance, it completely skews up the results. For example, with the Dodgers in their postseason pitching, first off, some of these pitchers have not even pitched yet. Ben Kasparius, Justin Robleski hasn't even thrown a pitch. Jack Dreyer, I don't think he has pitched. I think he pitched maybe once in the Philly series. Emmett Sheehan hasn't really pitched much at all, which is why you see with Emmett Sheehan, he's got a 10.83 or 10.8 ERA in the postseason. Clayton Kershaw obviously had the one performance that did not go well for him. But you're seeing a lot of these guys, some of the results are massively skewed by what they've done during the course of the postseason. But you're seeing the Dodgers have some guys that have had increased success from what they had during the course of the regular season, but still, it's not absorbently above what they are capable of. Let's look at the Mariners and their pitching staff. You're seeing a lot of blue again. You're seeing a lot of guys, particularly with the starting rotation. Logan Gilbert, 4.2 postseason ERA versus 3.44 during the course of the regular season. He has not been pitching as well. George Kirby, who's going on the mound tonight, he's got a 7.07 ERA during the course of the postseason. Over the course of the regular season, 4.21. But if you look at the underlying metrics, George Kirby is a lot better pitcher than that. Luis Castillo has been a little bit overperforming. Bryce Miller has been one of the guys that has helped save this series for the Seattle Mariners. You look at some of their bullpen arms. Andres Munoz has performed well. Brash has performed well. Bizarro has performed well. A lot of the other guys have been underperforming as well. So the question is for the Mariners, particularly when it comes to their starters, are they tired? Or is it something to where they can rebound and they can get back to the pitching staff that they have? Because there is, from the surface of this, a lot of room to grow. So that leads us into this comparison right here. This overall roster that I have right here. If you just go by postseason stats and you make your comparison from that, the Dodgers have a strong advantage. Really, the only advantages that the Mariners have had over the course of the postseason are base running and the bullpen. And you can make that exact same evaluation if you look at the full season stats, just looking at what the teams did over the course of the full season. However, and this is what brings me pause and where it brings me slight worry about the Seattle Mariners as a team, there is a lot of room to grow with some of the guys that are on offense and on the pitching staff of the Seattle Mariners. Randy Arozarena is drastically underperforming. Julio Rodriguez is underperforming. Jorge Polanco is underperforming quite a bit. Dominic Canzone, who, if he faces against right-handed pitching, does really well. Again, 150 WRC plus on the season for him against righties, is underperforming. Some of the starting pitchers are underperforming, which means that if they get back to the potential that they have, the Mariners as a roster match up really well, and their offense goes toe-to-toe with the Dodgers. Again, these would be what the stats are like over the course of the full season, and there is a lot of power that can go like that over the course of the postseason. They have really good offense that could match up if they show up. Base running, they can run the bases pretty well. Dodgers still at advantage for starting pitching, but the bullpen, every single one of these stats would be an advantage to the Mariners. Looking at the roster for the Mariners, these are the bullpen stats. They can match up pretty well with what the Dodgers have out of the bullpen. So the question when doing this evaluation, when looking at each one of these teams, is not necessarily how is this team playing, or it becomes a question, I should say, of what do you base who you want to see in the postseason on? Do you base it on the full regular season stats? Do you base it on who's on the roster and what they did during the course of the regular season? Or do you base it on the postseason stats? And I think for this, I think a fair evaluation for this team has to take into account all of them. You have to understand where the Mariners are at, and they are a very good team. They probably are. They're pitching as far as they have during the course of the postseason as they have ever had in their existence, and they are trying to clinch their first ever pennant, their first ever American League pennant. And so a lot of these guys have not pitched in this situation before. Inexperience could be of benefit to the Dodgers because of what the Mariners are and where the Mariners are at. There also is reasons to not be super optimistic about that matchup, even if the Dodgers make it to where they have home field advantage during the course of the postseason. So that is a word of caution. I know there's a lot of people that want to face the Mariners because they've seen how they've done during the course of the postseason. That's not the Mariners team that could show up. It might be the Mariners team that shows up, but there's a much better version of this team that potentially could show up that could be dangerous to the Dodgers. Let's shift gears and let's talk about the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, all these numbers that I'm showing up here are available for each one of you guys. In the description of this video, you have access to either an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, depending on which one you utilize. I provided both for you with each one of these numbers. I'd be curious for you guys to dive into each one of these numbers and do your own comparison. Or if there's something that I'm not showing with this, please let me know and I'd be happy to dive into that. Again, I want to provide you guys with the best information possible and as comprehensive of a view about the Mariners and the Blue Jays so that you guys can understand where these teams are at and make an evaluation for each one of these teams on your own. We'll get into the comment section in just a little bit. We'll be diving into a lot of your comments. And again, we'll be taking you guys up pretty close into first pitch of Game 7 in the American League Championship Series tonight that will determine who the Dodgers face in the World Series. Let's dive into the Toronto Blue Jays because Toronto and where they are at is very different from where the Mariners are at. Kind of inverse in a sense, particularly on the offensive side. Pitching, they're dealing with a lot of similar things that the Mariners have to where the Dodgers, especially on the starting pitching side, much better than what the Blue Jays are. However, whereas the Mariners as an offense has been underperforming as a unit in the postseason, the Blue Jays as an offense has been overperforming. And we're going to be diving into that in just a second. Again, same three columns that we utilized before. Full season, what are the actual numbers over the course of the full season for the Toronto Blue Jays, as well as the World Series roster? What do the stats of the teams that are currently on the postseason roster for the Blue Jays, what do those actually represent? Again, it does not matter what the guys that aren't on the World Series roster did for the Toronto Blue Jays. It only matters what those guys on the roster did. So guys that didn't get a whole lot of experience. The example that I use for the Dodgers, Michael Conforto, but also a guy like a Buddy Kennedy. It doesn't matter what Buddy Kennedy's stats were for the Dodgers in the regular season because he's not going to be on the World Series roster. So that removes that, and we'll look at both of those, as well as postseason stats. And this is where there's going to be a vast difference between what the Blue Jays did during the course of the regular season and what they are doing right now, and why so many people see them as the team that they do not want to face Toronto because of what they've done as an offensive unit in the postseason. So looking just at what we're going to do is we're going to focus, again, World Series roster and postseason stats. As an offense, just looking at the World Series roster, the Dodgers have a lot of different advantages. 119 WRC plus versus 114 for Toronto. You look at the power department in particular, and this is where there is a misconception based off of what Toronto is doing. Toronto's hitting for a lot of power during the postseason, but if you look at the players that are actually on their roster, they have not hit for as much power as they've showcased in the course of the postseason. 213 home runs for the Dodgers versus just 163 for all the players that are on the postseason roster for the Toronto Blue Jays. Vast difference in ISO as well. ISO being isolated power, being the statistic that takes into account only the power components and tries to put that to a number. What Toronto excels at, and this is where you have to do an evaluation of Toronto, particularly when it comes to postseason play, is their biggest thing is they do not strike out. Now, a 17% or a little bit over 17% strikeout percentage might not seem like a low strikeout percentage, but in the game of baseball, that is the best in Major League Baseball. 17.8% was the lowest in Major League Baseball this season. They make the most contact, and they are very much a contact-oriented team that plays really good defense. That is the identity of the Toronto Blue Jays. You look at fielding run value, 44 versus -1 on the season, 14 outs above average versus 9 for the Dodgers. There's a lot of different areas, especially when you break it down individual players that perform really well defensively for the Toronto Blue Jays. They also make an insane amount of contact and do not whiff. Just a sub 21% whiff percentage for the Toronto Blue Jays on the postseason roster. They've done an unbelievable job at being able to make contact. They're not a great base running team, though. Don't steal a whole lot of bases. They're going to make contact. They're going to get some of their base hits. They're going to get some of the timely power, and they've gotten a lot more power than what in the postseason than what they've had during the course of the regular season. We'll compare that in just a second. But let's take a look at the Blue Jays as an offense really quick, because I want to make sure that you guys are familiar with a lot of these guys. Obviously, guys that are going to stand out are going to be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I've heard, I think you guys had mentioned him a ton in the comment section, and he is an extraordinary player, and he has gone off unbelievably during the course of the postseason. 137 WRC plus on the season, 292 average. The power wasn't necessarily as prevalent as I would have expected for him. Just a 175 ISO on the season. Hits the ball really hard, though. Does not strike out. You look at some of these strikeout percentages, and this is from a typical Mariners lineup, and this is one that they're going to put out quite a bit if they advance to the World Series. Springer, less than 19%. 13.7 for Nathan Lucas. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., sub 14%. Alejandro Kirk, sub 12%. Dalton Varsho strikes out quite a bit, 28%. Ernie Clement, 10.5%. Addison Barger, 24%. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, sub 17%. And then Andres Jimenez, sub 18%. Not a lot of guys that strike out a lot, which means they're going to go out there and put the ball in play quite a bit. Look at a lot of these different numbers. But you look at as far as impact bats, they really have two major impact bats. Well, two major impact bats. One is George Springer, who obviously got hit by a pitch during Game 5, I believe what it was, of the American League Championship Series. Wasn't quite the same during the game yesterday, and that's going to be a very big question mark for the Blue Jays going forward because he was their best hitter on the season. 309 batting average, 399 on base percentage, 560 slugging percentage. I know there is a lot of animosity, and rightfully so, for George Springer and what he has done in the past as a member of the Houston Astros, but he is a good baseball player and a good hitter. And he steps up massively during the course of the postseason. It's him and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. that are on the positive side of 125 WRC plus that are going to be in the lineup on a consistent, regular basis. Otherwise, Alejandro Kirk, solid hitter, really solid hitter, 116 WRC plus in the season, 282 batting average, but not as much power behind him, just a 421 slugging percentage. Dalton Varsho has performed well this season, but this is above what his normal expectations are on the course of the season. And then they have some solid role players. Nathan Lucas, especially against right-handed hitters, has been playing quite a bit. Ernie Clement, we'll get to him in just a second, 98 WRC plus in the season. Addison Barger, 107 WRC plus as well. Then they have a couple guys on the bottom of the order, 75 for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Andres Jimenez is also playing quite a bit. They are playing because of the absence of Bo Bichette. Now, Bo Bichette, who would be another impact bat for the Toronto Blue Jays if they were to advance in the postseason. There's a lot of question mark as far as whether he's actually going to be able to play, and I think there's a lot of doubts as far as whether he'd be able to make it on the postseason roster. They just had to remove Anthony Santander, who struggled quite a bit on the season. He was removed from the postseason roster. He will not be available for the World Series. But there's a lot of guys, especially not a lot of name recognized talents, or a lot of guys that have been solid contributors for the Blue Jays that are overperforming what they were expected to do or what they had done during the course of the regular season. And this is where we look at the Toronto Blue Jays, and this is where, especially when I make an evaluation as far as who I would rather the Dodgers play, I take a little bit of pause. Because, again, this is making a comparison full season just looking at second half and postseason. Again, I ask you, what do you put as a higher emphasis in evaluation as far as determining who you would rather play? The postseason stats, the stats in the second half, or the full season stats? And looking at the difference between the two, because what you're going to notice is there's a lot more red in this part of the equation, meaning there's a lot of players that are overperforming in comparison to what the Mariners. There's a lot of players that were underperforming. In this case, George Springer is underperforming what he has done over the course of the regular season and the postseason, but still a 133 WRC plus been a weapon. Nathan Lucas, 32 points better WRC plus than what it was during the regular season. Vlad Jr., 302 WRC plus in the postseason, 165 points better than what it was during the course of the regular season. He's been unbelievable during the course of the regular season. Can he continue this, or are you going to have to go and completely work around him and face up against a lot of these other hitters, which I think would be the strategy if you are the Dodgers? Alejandro Kirk, right in line with what he did in the regular season. Same thing with Dalton Varsho. But here's where it gets me a little bit of pause, because you have some players, and particularly I'm going to point out, you can point out Nathan Lucas as part of this mix, but Nathan Lucas, Ernie Clement, 211 WRC plus in the postseason versus 98 in the full season. Addison Barger, 148 WRC plus in the postseason versus 107 in the full season. Andres Jimenez, 98 WRC plus versus 70 in the regular season. This is where I have a little bit of pause, because if we're anticipating going forward, what is the better bet for an offense? That Randy Arozarena, Julio Rodriguez, Jorge Polanco, and a lot of these guys that have a lot of track record of success are going to rebound and become more of the players that they are, meaning they're going to have more success, meaning the Mariners offense is going to get better as they advance in the postseason. Are you going to bet that is going to be the case more? Or are you going to bet that Ernie Clement, Addison Barger, Andres Jimenez, and Nathan Lucas are going to perform in line with what they have and drastically overperforming in the course of the postseason from what they did in the regular season? That's where I have some pause, because if we look at a comparison of the Dodgers and the Blue Jays as an offense, Blue Jays look like they are performing incredibly well, because they are performing incredibly well in the postseason. 294 batting average, 353 on base percentage, 532 slugging, 144 WRC plus in the postseason. This is a strong advantage in comparing the offenses that have been in play, comparing the Dodgers offense to the Blue Jays offense, just looking at their postseason stats. Looking at the power component, if we look at the full season, it's about a 165-ish ISO for the Blue Jays in the regular season. It's 238 as an ISO during the postseason right now. 19 home runs for the Blue Jays, which means they're hitting for a lot more power than what they did in the regular season. And they're utilizing this, and that's comparing guys that are on the postseason roster to what they did in the regular season, not just looking at the full season and saying that they're overperforming. They're doing really well. And then the strikeout percentage, which is perhaps contributing in combination with the power to why the Toronto's offense has performed incredibly well. 14.6 strikeout percentage for the Blue Jays in the course of the postseason. That is even lower than what it was during the course of the regular season, which means the Blue Jays are going to put the ball in play. And right now, they are hitting for power, which becomes a question of, do you believe that each one of these guys is going to continue with their progress, going to continue with how well they are hitting going forward? Or do you believe that negative regression is going to take place? And I think this is a question of how quickly do you think negative regression is going to fit in? Or do you think that they are just rolling at the right time and they're going to continue this process of rolling and doing really well? That's where I have difficulty and challenge with the matchup as far as who I would want the Dodgers to face. Looking at the pitching side of things, because if we look at the overall offense, I think we're looking at the regular season or just roster by roster comparison, the Dodgers have a very strong advantage. However, with the way the Blue Jays are playing, they're playing really, really well right now. Pitching-wise, you look at the starting pitching for the Dodgers in comparison to the Blue Jays, it's pretty strong leaning to the Dodgers. 3.26 for those that are on the postseason roster for the Dodgers versus a 3.64 for starters, or that for pitchers overall that are on the postseason roster. Let's actually go to starters, because the starters, there's even a drastic difference. 2.68 for starters on the Dodgers postseason roster versus about a 4 for the Toronto Blue Jays. If we look at what they've done during the course of the postseason, these are each one of the ERA estimators: ERA, expected ERA, FIP, xFIP, and Sierra, all about 2 runs greater than what the Toronto Blue Jays have put up as a starter unit in the postseason. The Dodgers, as a starting pitching staff, is rolling, and they're doing incredibly well. They're striking out a lot of hitters. Looking at them, for the players that are on the World Series roster, about a 30% strikeout percentage for their starters, versus about a 24% for the Blue Jays. Again, the starters that the Blue Jays have don't really walk a whole lot of hitters. Just 6.4% walk percentage for them. They're going to go out there and throw some strikes. And the Dodgers just seem to be doing really well with that, even with the quality of contact. When we get to the bullpens are actually relatively even. And if we look at this, both bullpens are really struggling in the postseason. Overall, on the season, relatively even. Full regular season, there's a slight edge to the Toronto Blue Jays. Blue Jays get a lot of swing and miss coming out of their bullpen. For those on the postseason roster, it's about a 26% strikeout percentage, which has bared out. In the postseason, the Dodgers are dramatically underperforming, getting swing and miss out of their bullpen, with just an 18.3% strikeout percentage for the bullpen right now. But you're seeing with the Blue Jays, as far as a pitching staff, it is going to be something where that's going to be an advantage for the Dodgers. Let's dive into each one of these individual players to be able to understand who are the players at hand. You have Kevin Gausman, who is a really, really good pitcher for the Blue Jays. Overall in the season, 3.59 ERA. Trey Savage has come up through all of the levels of minor league baseball to be a prominent pitcher for the Blue Jays. After just 14 innings, he's going to take you saw him in the game yesterday. He pitched really well for them, got double plays in key spots. They're going to be relying on him. Shane Bieber and Max Scherzer round out the rest of the starting pitching staff, with Chris Bassett and Eric Lauer shifting on over to the bullpen. But you're seeing some of these numbers that each one of these guys have. Dodgers just have better arms, starting pitching-wise, on paper than what the Blue Jays have. If we're looking at the bullpen, I think there's a little bit of underperformance that the Blue Jays are having as a bullpen staff than that they are performing in the postseason than what they did during the regular season, which again, in part has to do with the small sample size. But looking at these numbers right here, you can see the starting pitching for the Blue Jays is actually around what they had done, especially with Kevin Gausman overperforming and Max Scherzer overperforming. And then Savage and Bieber slightly underperforming what they have. But you can see a whole lot of blue in the Toronto bullpen, meaning that Seranthony Dominguez has been worse. Yariel Rodriguez has been worse. Brendan Little has been significantly worse. Braden Fisher, friend of the program, just a great human being, been a little bit worse than what he had after a really good regular season. Flu Hardy has been worse. Eric Lauer has been worse as well. So you're seeing a lot of underperformance for the Blue Jays bullpen, which is why they've relied very heavily on somebody like a Louis Varland, who they will probably throw out there again, even though I think he's pitched just about every single game of the League Championship Series. And then they're also going to throw out Jeff Hoffman as well. The Blue Jays bullpen is struggling massively right now. And as far as a pitching staff, especially when you compare that to what the Dodgers have done this postseason, and they have some people that they can potentially rely upon, and in particular, the Dodgers as a starting pitching staff is performing incredibly well, the Dodgers have a chance to reverse some of the trends that the Blue Jays as an offense has done and succeeded over the course of the postseason. But in order to do that, the Dodgers would, because of the identity of the Blue Jays, have to rely on less swing and miss, on more soft contact oriented type of a team. And this is a little bit of a different approach because I think the Blue Jays are going to be a much more aggressive team at the plate in comparison to the team that they just faced in Milwaukee. Milwaukee as an identity did not swing at a whole lot of pitches over the course of the regular season and forced pitchers to make plays and took advantage of mistakes. With the Blue Jays, since they don't strike out a whole lot, they're going to make contact and they're going to put the ball in play quite a bit, which means it's going to be up to the Dodgers as a pitching staff to be able to go out there and not just rely on getting swing and miss, because it's not going to be as prevalent in the Blue Jays series as it has been perhaps against other opponents, or perhaps what it would be against a series like the Mariners. So, when it comes to a question, and I'll re-emphasize this back to you guys, and again, please look at each one of these numbers. There's more spreadsheets than what we had looked at that I'm sure we'll get to once we know what the actual World Series match up. Looking at different splits against righties versus lefties, diving deeper into some of the numbers because some of the numbers are just awesome to be able to look at. But ultimately, this game is not going to be played just on paper. It's going to be played on the field. So the question becomes for you guys as you watch the game tonight and as you're determining which is the best opponent for the Dodgers to face. One, I think the Dodgers have the ability and the talent level to be able to beat either the Mariners or the Blue Jays. I think they have that in common with both of them. However, there's differences in how each one of these teams line up. And I think when it's coming down to me, I think it's coming down to a question of, do you believe more in some of the positive regression that could come with some of the hitters on the Mariners lineup, particularly, as I've mentioned quite a few times, Rosarena, Julio Rodriguez, Jorge Polanco, Dominic Canzone, Eugenio Suarez, a lot of those guys. You believe that they are going to rebound to becoming better more? Or do you believe that the Blue Jays, some of the Blue Jays hitters, Nathan Lucas, Ernie Clement, Addison Barger, Andres Jimenez, those guys are going to continue to be hitting as well as they had been? Do you want a team that has more power potential for what they did during the regular season, or is showcasing more power in the postseason right now, even if they don't have the track record of doing so during the course of the regular season? Do you want a team that has that power but has some swing and miss, but also has a lot of swing and miss and not walking a lot of guys out of the bullpen? Or do you want a team that puts the ball in play all the time in the Toronto Blue Jays, but perhaps has a bullpen that is really struggling quite a bit? There's a lot of pros and cons that come with each one of these matchups, and there is a lot of good players that are on each one of these teams. And the reason why I started off was showing the historical trends, and the reason why I started off with talking pretty heavily and in depth about each one of these teams is because in order for the Dodgers to finish the job, which you saw the celebration that the Dodgers had after they beat the Brewers, or at least on-field celebration, it was not the same as what it's going to be for either Toronto or Seattle tonight. Toronto or Seattle tonight is going to be jumping up and down, hollering on the field because this means so much to them. The Dodgers understand the job, and they understand the motive, and that is to finish the job. The job is not done. The season is going to be determined by what happens over the course of the next 4 to 7 games in the World Series for the Dodgers, and that is their goal, that is their destiny, that is what they're trying to do. And in order to best maximize what they can do in the World Series, yes, there's an evaluation of where your players are at. But it also is imperative for you as an organization to, one, make sure that you are ready to go. And then number 2, to understand opponents, where teams are at, and historical trends as well. Because for the Dodgers to go out and win this series, yes, they are and should be the favorite and should be absolutely favored to win this World Series. It will somewhat be bucking historical trends as far as teams that sweep the league championship series, losing record less than 1.5 runs per game. They'll have to buck some of those trends. Not to say that the Dodgers are underdogs in any shape or form. That's not the narrative I'm trying to get out. But I'm saying they have some challenges that they still have to overcome And if we are writing this team right now as we sit on October 20th as the World Series champions already, you're discounting the hunger of some of these other teams, and there has to be a respect that you have for other teams in order to maximize your play and to be able to play as well as you possibly can to be able to win a World Series. Winning the World Series is difficult. It is right there for the Dodgers, though, and I couldn't be more excited because I still believe, despite all of this, that the Dodgers have the best chance to go out there, win another World Series, win back-to-back, give Clayton Kershaw one more World Series ring, and to establish this team as one of the best eras of any team to go out there and play baseball. That is the opportunity that the Dodgers have over the course of the next week and a half, but you got to go through a pretty tough opponent either in Toronto or Seattle. That's going to be happening tonight. Let's go into the comment section to be able to go and dive into each one of these. Again, I'm going to reemphasize, all of the resources that I have presented to you guys are available in the description. I highly encourage you, one, take a look at those. Also, fact check those. Make sure that they are actually accurate and ask questions to me because I want to make sure that I'm providing as accurate of information as I possibly can because it is my duty and my responsibility as being the host on the show to give you guys my absolute best. And I think that you guys, each one of you guys, deserve that. So let's get into some of the comments section right now to be able to dive into each one of these questions right here. Johnny Owen, I saw all 3 games. Drove from my home in Salem, Oregon, talking about the series at the end of the regular season, Dodgers versus Mariners. We have a much better club, at least from the outset, or at least when those games were played. You did. But remember, it's a snapshot of time. I went to a game in Pittsburgh where the Dodgers played the Pirates. And if I were just to take into account that game that I went to, which was the Emmett Sheehan start that was out there, I shouldn't make a conclusion that the Pirates are better than the Dodgers, even though the Pirates won and ended up sweeping the Dodgers in Pittsburgh. That is something that you have to be careful of making that determination by one single game series. But certainly, I think there are advantages that the Dodgers have over the Mariners. Chuck Olson, I think we have the same roster makeup. Do you think there will be any changes? I don't think there are going to be any major changes to the roster, or at least that's not the expectation that I would have. I think they have a really good mix. When it comes to the back end of the bullpen, perhaps there could be a little bit of mix-up, but I'm not really expecting a whole lot of that. Both Toronto and Seattle have a good makeup as far as righties versus lefties and being able to hit both of them, and I don't think there's other guys that they would fit into this mix that the Dodgers would want to counteract. It becomes a little bit of question about some of the guys at the back end of the bullpen, particularly Robleski and Kasperius. Where do they fall on the pecking order? Because we haven't even seen them pitch at all in the postseason. We have hardly seen Jack Dreyer, who's been one of their best relievers over the course of the postseason, pitch in the postseason. So that's a little bit of questions as far as that. One player I do expect to remain on the postseason roster because he's been involved in just about every single game, even though there has been question marks as far as whether he would be on the postseason roster. Fully expect Justin Dean stay on the postseason roster. If they decide to add another pitcher, the guy that I would expect to be replaced would be Hae-Sung Kim, but I'm not expecting that right now. I'm still expecting the 14 position players, 12 pitchers, really 13 pitchers because you have Shohei Ohtani to be in the mix. Justin Lamas, people say we ruined baseball. However, we didn't spend $245 million on Hollywood lifestyle, all about spending money the right way. Spend a lot of money the right way. They're doing a lot of good things the right way as an organization as well that has led to a lot of the success that they have. Greg Murphy, thank you very much for joining us. Mariners pitchers are tiring out. That is one thing to take into account, that sometimes that would lean a little bit more into evaluating based off the postseason numbers, looking at the postseason trends, and especially with the Mariners having to utilize a lot of their guys, especially during that crazy game against the Tigers. Not great for me here in the state of Michigan, but during that crazy game, a lot of Mariners pitchers are pitching deeper than they ever have over the course of a season. So this is something that is brand new to a lot of these guys. Could they be tiring out? That could be something that could be happening. History Man, thank you very much for joining us. Go Dodgers and God bless. Chuck Huddleston, responding to Justin Lama, says, Dodgers drafted the bottom in the amateur draft, have 1 million less in international bonus pool, yet have a great farm system. That's absolutely right. Let's see. History Man's hoping that Mariners would advance since that means the Dodgers would have home field advantage. That is one thing that if you just want to go based off of, I don't really know who to pick, I'm just going to pick the home field advantage, very well could be doing that, be making that point and be able to go along with that. Let's get into some of these. Seriously good stuff, Austin. Thank you very much, Tim Rogers, Blue Madness, Dodgers 2080 joining in the chat. I did not realize that he was in the chat, so I greatly appreciate you for tuning into this. Let's continuing on with some of these. History Man, I'll be honest, if someone told me last year it'd be the Mariners and the Blue Jays playing Game 7 of the ALCS, would have thought they were crazy, but here we are. Absolutely. Chuck Huddleston, Dodger starters can make good numbers bad pretty quickly. That's absolutely right. And you can have all the confidence in the world about the Dodgers and their ability to go out there and have a lot of success over whichever offense that they have, and can make sure that some of the Mariners hitters are continuing to struggle, or going out there and making sure that the Blue Jays hitters regress back to what they did during the course of the regular season, or even worse than that. The Dodgers pitching staff has a really good work on its hands. History Man, 1995 Braves and 19 Nationals had 6 days off between the LCS and World Series and went on to win it. Dodgers have the opportunity to do the same thing. They absolutely do, and it is imperative that they take the lessons that they learned last year and apply them to what they have going forward in the postseason. Let's see. Continuing on to some of these. Lucy Chen, more worried about the 6 days off. We need our offense to wake up. That is my biggest concern with the offense, is the days off can very seriously impact offense as a whole. Not necessarily worried about the pitching staff. I think they'll be fine. It's what does the offense do with getting out of rhythm. I think they have found something to be able to take advantage of that, but I don't necessarily know for sure. Or rather, I think they have done that, but it's very difficult to get out of rhythm. Yeah, I think that's a better way to be able to say it. It's very difficult to be able to get out of rhythm and then get back right into it. And hopefully Pages is able to wake up for this. It can be a very, as Chuck Huddleston says, be a pretty streaky hitter, but he can carry a team if he gets hot. And I think it'd be amazing to be able to see him turn around if he is able to get hot. Paul Vaughn, thank you very much for joining us. Bring on Toronto, and go Loons to you, Paul. I think I've seen some comments about the Loons before in the past or you. If it's not you, go Loons anyway. I'll say that to everybody. Tony says, intriguing how the 3 teams that won after sweeping the LCS, in fact, had more days off than the teams that lost, with the exception of Kansas City in 2014. Yeah, it's a interesting evaluation of what they have. RACI Auto Parts says, I want a t-shirt that says, the Dodgers ruined baseball, 2025 World Series champions. It's not over yet, but that seems to be the track that we could potentially be going down. Let's see. Continuing on to a few more of these. Chuck Huddleston, Austin, I generally think they will continue to struggle facing superior pitching to what they have seen during the regular season. Game planning is much more fine-tuned for a specific playoff opponent. That's what it has to be. It has to be more fine-tuned for that. Lucy Chen, I want to see Dave pitch Cian/Ben Kasparius more. Trinan cannot go back-to-back nights. I'd love to see that too, to be able to do that. And there's some other guys that they're not utilizing out of the bullpen that I think would be good. And then mentions leading 5-1 would have been perfect for Sheehan to get his feet wet. Instead, went back to Trinan and Roki. I think that has to do with an evaluation of you have a chance to be able to sweep this series and finish it off. And according to the moves that Dave Roberts is making, and this is where you can have a difference of agreement with what Dave Roberts did and what Dave Roberts thinks and what you think, is Blake Trinan still very much remains in Dave Roberts' trust tree. And if he thinks that he's going to give him the best opportunity to go out there and win, when you have a chance to be able to advance in the World Series and you're up by 4 runs, I think that was the call that Dave Roberts hadn't made. But still, would like to see some of those other guys be able to get in if it is the right opportunity, because I still think some of these guys, Sheehan, as mentioned, is really, really solid. Craig Osterberg, thank you very much for joining us. Let's see, Showtime was shut down for most of the NLDS and NLCS because the Brewers and Phillies are heavy left-handed good pitching. Yes, that is a good point, Diatran. If we're talking about Blue Jays and Mariners, which is what it was pointed out, is that there's mostly right-handed pitching against each, which means Ohtani has a chance to be able to go off in the World Series. David Yu, not sold on the Mariners. They need 5 games to beat the mediocre Detroit Tigers. Fair evaluation as far as where the Tigers team that was playing, and I know that being here in the state of Michigan. Craig Osberg, hi back to you as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's see, going on to a couple more of these comments before we get into being able to watch the ALCS. Michael K. Treinen has 0 losses and 0 blown saves this postseason. Still reliable for the situations Roberts puts him in. Yeah, it's been a struggle ERA-wise for Blake Treinen. He's given up some runs. He had, I think, one appearance that did not go well at all, but a couple of other runs that have gone pretty well. So hopefully he's able to continue to go out there, have a good rest of the run, and be able to go forward. Chuck Huddleston, surprising how much blue there is for a team advancing so far. Big boppers making the difference. Talking about, I think, in the Mariners in that sense. Chuck Huddleston, or perhaps the Blue Jays, one of the 2 teams as well. That's what you're going to have when you're evaluating all teams. There's going to be some good, there's going to be some bad. You look at their baseball smarts, a lot of red, some blue as well. As far as where things are at. Al Minerva, thank you very much for joining us as well. Chuck Huddleston, Guerrero is the scariest by far to me. I might walk him with the bases loaded if I had a 3-run lead. Very well could. V-Track, I don't think it matters as far as facing the Mariners or the Blue Jays. That's where, and I think that's a fair evaluation that you could have about the Dodgers. What I would encourage you to do is don't just say that. Do your homework and dive in and state why exactly you think that is the case. That would be at least my plea to you if you have the time to be able to do so, or if you don't have the time to be able to do so, just try to understand as best as you can some of the strengths of where these teams are at so we can make the best decision going forward. Appreciate you for tuning in for that. Let's see. Chuck Huddleston, I just feel like Seattle is the better matchup for me for the Dodgers with the way the Dodgers are playing. They should be able to take either of them. I think the Phillies were the next best team. History man of the Mariners, the pitching may determine that series also, and it may depend on which offense really gets going. Yeah, it's going to be determined on which one of these offenses is going to be able to wake up and be able to do well. Does the Blue Jays offense continue the role that it is on, or does the Mariners offense wake up and perhaps match with what the Dodgers offense has? Again, all of the stats that I used earlier in the show in the description of the video. I'm going to keep re-emphasizing this because this is information that you're not going to get elsewhere. And this is going to be the best combination of data that you can compare just about everywhere. Which allowed us to be able to see that the Mariners are not underperforming. Well, in Dakota Tony's point of view, Mariners not underperforming, they're just being exposed. So you don't believe that Julio Rodriguez is as good as of a player as he is, or that Jorge Polanco is not as good of a player. Fair evaluation right there, but Randy Rosen has been a really solid player throughout the season. He's been really underperforming in the postseason. Eugenio Suarez, really solid player throughout the seasons. He's been underperforming quite a bit. Dominic Canzone is not as bad as he has been during the postseason. He's not a negative 27 WRC plus player, even if he performed better than what he should have been during the course of the regular season, even though the expected stats don't back that up. There could be some underperformance that you have. David, you want to see the Dodgers light up Max Scherzer for 6 runs in 1 inning, and he could still bark at the manager and refuse to come out of the game. Still not super happy with Max Scherzer for some of the things that he had done in the past. Bruce Davis, that's right, Austin. The job is not done. The job is not done quite yet for the Dodgers, and that is that absolutely is the case. We'll get into a couple more of these really quick, just to make sure that I don't miss too much of these. I will miss some of these comments. I apologize. Both Mariners it says RACI Auto Parts. Both Mariners and Blue Jays are very good and pretty even. Hence, they're in a Game 7. I think the Mariners are the favorable matchup for the Dodgers due to less travel in 4 home games. Very well could be making that evaluation. Craig Osterberg, are you going to be making your guest 26-man roster this week? I'm sure we're going to be doing that. I think we should be doing a show hopefully sometime later this week. Casey and I will have the opportunity to be able to do so. Hopefully, I'm hoping for Wednesday. If not, I'll have some additional comment. But yeah, we'll be doing some more 26 player roster predictions. My guess, and this is my guess right now, this very well could change, but my guess is going to be pretty similar, if not exactly the same, to what it was in the National League Championship Series. I have a tough time being able to say, and I think there was a question about, will Tanner Scott be on the roster? I have a hard time without any additional information right now saying that Tanner Scott is going to be on the postseason roster, and they want an additional lefty like him to come out of the bullpen, especially when he hasn't pitched a long time or for a long time. So that would be my anticipation for that. So at least right now, I would guess it would be the same 26-man roster, but I have to think about it a little bit more, Craig. Thank you for bringing up that point. CNAV, thank you very much for joining us. You got to go back and watch the show. Full breakdown into both Seattle and Toronto as far as where both of these teams are at, if you have the opportunity to be able to do so. And as I've repeated so many times during this show, because I put a lot of work into this, all this data is available in the description below, so you can be able to look at it after the show and do your own evaluation about it. Tim Rogers, thank you very much for joining us. Info shared is gold. Feel free to be able to use that on your show and your information and utilize that as best as you possibly can for your evaluation of where things are at. I'm always willing and able to be able to help out, and my goal is to make information as well readable for all of us so that we can make the best evaluations that we possibly can. So feel free to utilize that in your show with whatever you have. I'd be able to break down it, and as information gets updated, I'll go from there and be able to make updates to each one of the sheets and try to make sure that they are as updated as they possibly can. Let's see. CNAV, I'm definitely going to watch the beginning of the show as soon as it's finished. Thank you for your hard work, Austin. So I think that's going to do it for the show. What we're going to do today, a long breakdown, and there's a lot of numbers that I threw at you guys, and that it comes from a state of wanting to make sure that you guys are as informed as possible. It could be a little bit overwhelming, and I totally get that, and I apologize if this is not your type of show. This is the type of person that I am, just for you guys. If you guys aren't aware, I'm a statistician. That is my professional gig that I have. I don't just do Dodgers Daily. I'm a statistician outside of this. And so I think a lot this way. And I want to make sure that the data is backing up what we think is the case, what we think is true. And so when we're doing this evaluation of both the Mariners and the Blue Jays, I want to make sure that we are doing a proper evaluation of both teams, because I have a lot of respect for other organizations, and I have a lot of respect for both of these fan bases. Mariners have never been to a World Series. I feel for them as a people, as a fans, because I know how difficult that can be, and I know how good Dodgers fans have it. And for that team and for that franchise to go out there, they're going to go out there and give their absolute best if they're able to make it to the World Series. For the Toronto Blue Jays, similarly, they haven't been to the World Series since 1993. I've not seen in my lifetime either of these two teams in the World Series, which means that tonight is going to be a very important night for one of those two teams. And then when we're talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers, I want to make sure that we, that the Dodgers as a franchise and we as a fan base, respect the other organizations and what they are capable of doing, so we do not fall into the trap of assuming that the Dodgers are greatly superior to everybody. Yes, I believe the Dodgers do things better than other organizations. Yes, I believe the talent is much better than other organizations. But does that mean that it will showcase that itself in a 7-game series where, yes, anything can happen in a 7-game series, and we've seen inferior teams beat superior teams in World Series past? Will that be the case this year? Is going to be determined by how the Dodgers play, how they buck historical trends as far as offensive concerns after a long delay or long layoff after the league championship series, how they will do in comparison to either the Mariners or the Blue Jays, both of which have their own advantages and strengths. Seattle, a lot of positive regression could be on their horizon for them, and they have a ton of power in their bats, and they have some arms that can be absolutely electric. A lot of them are underperforming. For Toronto, they put a lot of balls in play. They make a ton of contact. They play really good defense, and right now they're hitting incredibly well. As a pitching staff, though, they have been struggling, both as the starters, who've been a little bit better, but as a bullpen, there's a lot of arms that are struggling quite a bit. Which matchup is that going to be? Is going to be determined tonight. Dodgers in the World Series. We will know who they will play and where they will play. What's going to be starting in a few minutes. Blue Jays versus Mariners to determine who plays the Dodgers in the World Series. And for the Dodgers, this next 2 weeks, is going to be an opportunity for everything that they have been working for since February, everything that has been building up since last offseason, comes to a culmination. Will the Dodgers be the first team in 25 years to be back-to-back World Series champions? That's going to be determined this week. We'll have more coverage here. Dodgers Dawgs is part of the Dodgers Daily Network. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. God bless, and go Dodgers.